It's a lot to get used to, but hey, not all bad. Sometimes there are no tears in the shower. At this point, Star Trek IV has officially been stuck in limbo for over 9 years. But now, some insiders are hinting that the J.J. Abrams-produced sequel might finally be moving forward, and it could even introduce Nurse Christine Chapel. Abrams did a solid job rebooting Star Trek in 2009, proving that the classic characters could be recast with younger actors. But one major character has been missing from his Star Trek universe, Nurse Chapel. And with all the new buzz about the movie actually happening, it's the perfect time to break down everything known so far. Originally played by Majel Barrett Roddenberry, Nurse Chapel was the main assistant to the USS Enterprise's chief medical officer, Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy, in Star Trek, the original series. She was primarily known for her unrequited love for Mr. Spock. However, Star Trek Strange New Worlds has completely revitalized the character, now played by Jess Bush. This new version of Chapel is more than just a supporting character with a romantic subplot. She's a brilliant, resourceful, and determined Starfleet officer seeking a greater destiny beyond a romance with Lieutenant Spock. With Strange New Worlds giving Chapel a richer personality and more agency, it makes sense for Star Trek IV to finally bring her into the Kelvin timeline. And here's the thing, Nurse Chapel has already been subtly teased in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies. While she hasn't been seen on screen, her existence in the alternate Kelvin timeline has been confirmed. Back in Star Trek 2009, when Dr. McCoy smuggles James T. Kirk aboard the Enterprise, he calls for Nurse Chapel to administer a treatment for Kirk's allergic reaction to the Malvar and mud flea vaccine. However, there were multiple female nurses on the scene, and none were explicitly identified as Chapel. So while she was technically present, she was never properly introduced. Then in Star Trek Into Darkness, Christine Chapel is actually name-dropped by Dr. Carol Marcus in a conversation with Kirk. According to Carol, Jim had a romantic past with Christine, though he seemed totally clueless about it. There was also a deleted scene where McCoy jokes that Chapel contracted an STD from Kirk, which, yeah, was probably for the best that it didn't make the final cut. But the point is, Nurse Chapel has been acknowledged in the timeline, even if she hasn't shown up in person. With that in mind, Star Trek IV could be the best and possibly last chance to properly introduce Christine Chapel into the Kelvin timeline. The movie could easily bring her back aboard the USS Enterprise, where she could serve as a foil to Dr. McCoy. Unlike in the original series, there was no unrequited romance between Chapel and Spock in the Kelvin timeline, so her inclusion wouldn't necessarily be tied to that old dynamic. Instead, her presence might actually make Kirk uncomfortable, leading to some comedic moments. And if Star Trek IV is set years after Star Trek Beyond, it makes sense that Chapel would have moved up in the ranks by now. She might not even be a nurse anymore. She could be Dr. Christine Chapel, which would make her an even more interesting counterpart to McCoy. Their medical expertise and personalities clashing aboard the Enterprise could add a fresh dynamic to the film. Plus, it would be great to finally see her in action in this timeline. Another reason Chapel's inclusion would be a smart move, the Star Trek movies have been seriously lacking in female characters. With Anton Yelchin's tragic passing in 2016, his character Pavel Chekhov won't be returning for Star Trek IV. Jayla was introduced in Star Trek Beyond and would likely take his place, but aside from her, Lieutenant Uhura has been the only major female character in the Kelvin timeline. Carol Marcus was introduced in Star Trek Into Darkness, but was completely absent from Star Trek Beyond. Adding Nurse Chapel wouldn't just honor the franchise by including an iconic yet overlooked character, it would also help balance the gender dynamic aboard the Enterprise. That said, the big question remains, will Star Trek IV actually happen? The movie has been in development hell for years, with directors like Matt Shakman, S.J. Clarkson, and even Quentin Tarantino signing on and then dropping out due to creative differences. Earlier this year, reports surfaced that screenwriter Steve Yockey, the flight attendant, was hired to pen what's being called the final chapter for Chris Pine's Enterprise crew. But since then, radio silence. Meanwhile, Paramount seems more focused on an untitled Star Trek origin movie directed by Toby Haynes, reportedly aiming to start filming in 2025 for a 2026 release to coincide with Star Trek's 60th anniversary. Despite all the uncertainty, the Star Trek cast has made it clear they'd love to return. Whether that includes Nurse or Doctor, Christine Chapel remains to be seen. But it would be a great opportunity to finally bring the character into the Kelvin time. If Star Trek IV does get the green light, one interesting question will be, who plays her? Jess Bush has been phenomenal as Chapel in Strange New Worlds, but she's portraying a younger version of the character. Since the Kelvin timeline crew would be in their 40s by now, they might go with an older actress for the role. Either way, it would be fantastic to finally see Nurse Chapel warp onto the big screen alongside Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. So what do you think? Should Star Trek IV finally bring in Nurse Chapel? And do you think the movie will actually happen? Let's discuss in the comments. Now, let's talk about another new development regarding Star Trek IV. Zoe Saldaña has reportedly signed on to return as Lieutenant Uhura in the film. A new report from Variety shed some light on the long-awaited sequel, confirming her involvement and sharing her hopes for Uhura's role. Saldaña wants to see more depth in Uhura's character beyond her established xenolinguistics expertise and is particularly interested in how her relationship with Spock has evolved. She's a xenolinguistics master, but I would like her doing something else. I'm curious to see her relationship with Spock and how that has evolved, she said. However, despite her enthusiasm, Saldaña has yet to read a script, and she made it clear that she's no longer putting her career on hold waiting for the project to take shape. In the first years when these sequels were becoming a thing in my life, I wouldn't do anything. I would just live my life and wait. Now I'm learning that there are so many things I want to do. I'm like, hey, what's out there? She explained. This update, while encouraging, doesn't necessarily mean that Star Trek IV is any closer to becoming a reality. The film has gone through numerous delays and changes in creative direction. Earlier this year, the flight attendant creator Steve Yockey was reported to be working on the script, but it remains unclear if his draft is still in play or if Paramount has shifted gears yet again. Considering the film was originally slated for a December 2023 release, only for that date to come and go without any real progress, it's evident that Star Trek IV is still in a state of limbo. Adding to the uncertainty, director Matt Shakman was once attached to helm the project, but ultimately left to take on the Fantastic Four reboot for the music. With no director currently confirmed and scheduling conflicts among the franchise's high-profile cast members, the film is unlikely to hit theaters before 2027, and even that might be optimistic. And that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Suggestions for future videos are always welcome in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay in the loop. And if you want, share your thoughts about this video in the comments.